I've never really heard of anyone storing gold under a mattress. I think it's pretty much all stored at the bottom of a lake. So you guys all know by now how much I like to talk about doom and gloom around here, which of course is not at all. I'm not a doomer, but I do know how YouTube works well enough to know that the more doom that you push, the more views you get. Gold confiscation is a really good example. If I were to make a video on how I thought that confiscation could actually happen, it would probably do pretty well. So let's talk about confiscation. There's really just not a whole lot of benefit that could come from nationalized gold confiscation simply because the dollar is no longer pegged to gold like it was when the executive order hit in 1933. That said, I am going to give a case for something like it in just a minute, but before we get there, I want to explain why it isn't really a looming threat. So, first of all, it was 90 years ago, and at that time, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 required 40% gold backing for any Federal Reserve notes issued. In other words, they needed your gold to make the money printer go burr. And we all know that that's just not the case anymore. Beyond that requirement, though, that broader idea of citizens saving in gold, effectively pulling their money out of the system, that just isn't something that would be popular if a country was having trouble keeping inflation in check. And I don't mean out of control for a few months type of inflation like we're seeing right now. I mean extended inflation, one that leads to aggressive currency devaluation. And if you've spent any time in the comments around here, you've probably seen references to the Weimar Republic. That was the failed German state. But like the executive order leading to the gold confiscation here in the US, that was 100 years ago. Now, we can find examples of third world countries going through this more recently, but there are no modern examples of it happening to a first world country. That's not saying it's not going to happen. There just aren't examples of it. And in the case of the US dollar, we are talking about the world's reserve currency. It's not really a comparable case to, say, Argentina's peso. So Turkey's another example, and it's hard to compare that. I don't know where you live, but it's hard to compare that to the US. But at least now we're talking about a developing nation, and they are up against 50% inflation right now. And they're having serious trouble with their local currency, the lira. And there's been some news out recently because the government is campaigning to get citizens to deposit their gold back into the banking system. Basically, the citizens are being asked to convert that gold back into the country's currency. And the finance minister there calls this under the mattress gold. And as you can probably guess, right now, it isn't going over very well. So where I'm going with this is that the US government does not need your gold to print money at this point, so there's really no reason for confiscation. Gold would be like any asset that you hold outside the banking system at this point. But Turkey's campaign to get its citizens to convert their gold savings into the country's currency is a really good case study of why you might want to have savings outside the banking system and outside the local currency. There's nothing conspiratorial there, that's just good common sense. Turkey's government, of course, wants more stable wealth in the system. They want its citizens all in on the fiat currency. What they don't want is the people saving gold under the mattress. They don't want people with assets that aren't affected by currency devaluation, assets that are portable. Now, I'm not saying the Turkish government has it out for its citizens any more than I think any other government does. But the central government is always looking at the much larger picture, and I'm sure that Turkey is scrambling to get inflation and its currency back under control. Now, if you live there and you have some savings in gold, we have a little bit of insulation from that issue. At least you have that fallback in whatever amount of wealth that you have saved in gold. And I think that that's a very important benefit here. Anyone who lives there is getting beat up by the currency devaluation. There's just no way around that. But those who have assets that aren't losing 50% of their value are obviously doing a little bit better. So circling back, I just don't think that we'll see gold confiscation in the United States, period. There's just no reason for it. But a campaign to get people spending their money rather than saving it, and definitely not saving it outside the banking system, outside the local currency, well, that isn't a wild idea. Now, I don't even know what it would look like, but I think it would probably have similar success here. The few who actually do save aren't going to give that up the moment they actually need it. It's probably at the bottom of a lake somewhere anyway. And if you were curious about how the 1933 gold confiscation Executive Order 3102 worked, well, each individual would be able to keep 5 ounces of gold as well as anything that was considered collectible. And the UK had a similar law from 1966 to 1971 that made it illegal to hold more than 4 gold coins, anything dated after 1817. So again, collector coins were exempt. So if you disagree and you think that confiscation could happen, well, you wouldn't have to give everything up and you wouldn't have to get too creative to keep a little bit more. Anyway, let's call it good there. Let us know what you think. Do you have a take on confiscation? Let us know. And while you're there, hit that like button. If you lost your gold in an unfortunate boating accident, make sure you're subscribed if you're into the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.